So, welcome everyone. I'm Claire Burney. I'm a co-director of Living Proof, and I'm here today with Jean, and we're going to share another in our series of short stories of hope. Welcome, Jean. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
I recently met Jean, and he shared a blog post, which you can find on our website, which is livingproof.org.uk, and I can highly recommend it. He told it from the perspective of what he wished he knew at the beginning of his recovery journey. And I thought that was a very interesting idea. When we first hear about neuroplastic pain or the mind-body approach to recovery, we can be full of hope, but the journey can be very up and down. So I thought it was a very interesting idea to share what you had learned along the way. Um, so Jean, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit and then pick up your story wherever it makes most sense for you?
Yes. So I am a chronic pain therapist and I support people who have chronic pain, but most importantly, I was a chronic pain sufferer. So I had chronic pain for quite a few years, and I, like most people, I think, went on a journey of trying to find some answers and to solve the problem of chronic pain because I wasn't really getting the answers that I was hoping to get, or at least I wasn't getting the results that I was like really wanting to get. Um, but at the time when I got chronic pain, I was already like a yoga therapist. I was already working with people. And the most frustrating part of the journey was the fact that I knew so much about anatomy and physiology and postures and stretches and strengthening exercises. So you can imagine, how disappointing it was for me to not be able to fix myself with the tools that were available to me, and I just couldn't understand what was going on. So yeah, so I then trained in this approach, mind body approach, and then I'm pain free, which is wonderful. But it's been an interesting journey, a bit of a roller coaster.
Yeah.
Um, because I hear a lot, because like most people, I think when I started this journey, I like read a lot of, recovery stories, and I think it's wonderful and it gives people hope. Um, but mine wasn't like the instant kind of I read the book and then I was pain free kind of thing. So it was a bit more difficult, and part of it I think is just because I wasn't really fully aware of how my emotions were, um or my inability to connect to my emotion was getting in the way of my recovery. Um yeah.
I relate to that as well, Jean, because I was not a quick recover either. It took me quite a while, which I'm happy about now because I learned a lot more about myself along the way. But at the time, it was very difficult and very frustrating. So
Yes.
maybe we could go back to when you first started having the chronic pain and what was happening then when that started. What was it like for you?
Yes. So I'm a very active person. I was always encouraged to do sports and exercise when I was growing up. And so I do, and I've been doing this Brazilian kind of activity called capoeira, and it's a mix of dance and martial art. I have to say, it's quite demanding on the body. And I kind of assumed that I had hurt myself at capoeira, because we were doing like these moves, and I just thought I started having pain in my lower back. But before that, I started having pain in my wrist.
Oh,
And I just assumed, it's capoeira because you're on your hands, you do cartwheels and handstands and these things. And I'm like, obviously, sort of like repetitive strain injury or something. And I didn't worry much about it, but then that pain wouldn't go away, and like I was kind of like working with it. but I could still do it, so I didn't, it was fine. And then the pain in lower back started, and it just got worse and worse and worse. So I tried everything, obviously, I used the yoga stuff. Um, wasn't getting better. And then I went to see a chiropractor and an osteopath, an Ayurvedic practitioner, because I thought maybe it's to do with my digestive system and my diet and that kind of stuff. And I was, frantically searching
Yeah.
the internet for a reason. But my first point of call was obviously to go and see my GP, um, because I was just like, well, you just never know. Like, and because I knew about anatomy and physiology, I was like, there could be something structural that could be the reason. So, um, my GP wasn't terribly concerned, but sent me to the physiotherapist, and I was assessed, and the physiotherapist didn't look terribly concerned either. Like I was getting better in their book. But it just wasn't feeling right. And then I met this osteopath who just checked me and just said like, I really can't find anything wrong, and was trying to be like really kindly, trying to ask me if there was anything going on in my life at the time. Um, and There was. I was getting divorced. And but I was kind of like, I mean, how would my divorce cause pain in my back, right? That makes no sense whatsoever. So I was just like, I'm happy to kind of, I was like, well, I'm open, but really I wasn't. But I'm open to this idea, but I don't see how, right? Because, and I think this is just something that about myself and about a lot of people that I support is just like we're very intelligent, analytical people, and things have to make sense, right?
Yes.
Before we can kind of like do anything. I'm not gonna just believe it because it's the energies and the universe and so to me, because I couldn't make that link, I just kind of like, brushed it under the carpet. And there was a lot of pressure in my life because of, due to that and other professional pressures, and I kind of um soldiered on. And that's when I got this really terrible, terrible sciatic pain, which really like meant that, it was moments of me being on the floor in my living room, like trying
Oh,
to find a position where it didn't hurt.
wow.
And I
Hmm.
was like crying. So it was absolutely horrendous. And I don't wish that kind of pain even to my worst enemy. I mean, this was just really, really bad. Um, and then that's when I kind of like signed up with like a chiropractor for like a month at a time for like the weekly sessions twice a week. And although that kind of pain, like, being lying down on the floor wasn't there, I was still in pain. It was like impacting my quality of life. I'd stopped to capoeira altogether, of course, because to me it was just like I can't even, do this. And And then I was kind of like, what am I doing? Like, and I listened to a podcast, and it was a podcast from like a coach that I quite like. And then she mentioned this book and made the link between pain and emotions. And I was like, what? And that kind of like interested me, and mentioned Alan Gordon's book, The Way Out.
The way out, yeah.
I immediately purchased that book and started reading it. And I was like, oh my God, this is possible. And this is kind of like there's, it's evidence-based, there's like science behind it, and it makes sense. Um, I mean, that didn't kind of make me better instantly,
Of course, but just
but it,
to reflect on what you were saying there, so the was it the osteopath had, I think, first of all, reassured you that there wasn't really anything wrong in your
yes,
body as far as they could see, and then
yeah.
opened up the idea by
Mm.
asking you about what was going on in your life, and you, through your background and training, were already open to the idea, but you couldn't I'm very analytical like you
Yes.
also. Make the link as to how could that scientifically be the case
Yeah.
that your brain could be involved, the emotions could be involved in creating these symptoms. So I think
Yes.
you were primed then by the time you were listening to this podcast.
I think so. And I think it kind of like it opened up like, this idea of curiosity. We talk about curiosity in this work a lot,
Yes.
and it made me curious. And when you're curious, can't really be anxious at the same time. And so it was very interesting to me because I did read the book and felt less anxious. And I think it's one of the things that, when you do this work, like obviously you're doing this work because you want to get out of pain, right?
Yes.
So, and in Alan Gordon's book, he talks about like outcome independence, like don't focus on the results, right? Which is kind of paradoxical because you're doing the work to get
It's
out of
very
pain.
hard to do. Yeah.
So it's very hard to do, but to me, it is interesting now looking back because this is one of the things that I see like it's like a massive obstacle is to really focus, like to see if you're doing well in this work, is to focus your attention on the pain. And I'm like, well, actually, no. In order to know if you're making progress, it's like, you might be looking at what's changing within the relationship to the pain. And in my case, like my anxiety lowering was significant to the point when I noticed it. And then that kind of made me curious again,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And in particular, because, anxiety is the opposite of safety, which is what we're trying to do in this work. So it's like if you lower anxiety, you come closer to safety. And really, progress is measured in safety, not in pain going away. I mean, long term, it will be. But, while you're doing the work, really what matters is the safety element of the work. And then that kind of really made me curious. Um, and then I kind of, because I was already like working, as a therapist, I was like interested in training. And then I went on to train in pain reprocessing therapy. I also got some support from a therapist, trained in, several modalities. Um, and then that really kind of helped me, get out of the pain. But I think it's kind of like, when I went on to the training of like pain processing therapy, like, my analytical mind was really satisfied and nourished with
Yes.
all the information and all the science and all the things and seeing examples of how people were led through, like somatic tracking, for example, that really helped. But what really helped me more, I think, is when we had time in sessions and we were like in small groups, and then we would like take turns in leading each other through techniques like somatic tracking and someone led me beautifully and I experienced safety in my body. And I was like, it was a new experience to me, or I couldn't remember it, right? Remember what safety felt like. Um, and it was really kind of something that was like a big insight that kind of led me to understand that I need to spend more time in my body rather than in my head. Um, because that relied on my head for most of my life and it served me well in many ways. But in this work, I understood that I needed to kind of get out of my head and spend time in my body a lot more.
It's
And that,
yeah,
yeah,
it's interesting that you were that way. You noticed that you were that way when you're also a yoga therapist. I would imagine
isn't
you're
that
spending a lot
crazy?
of time
Yeah,
in your body. Before you continue, Jean, I just wanted to say that Alan Gordon's book, The Way Out, is a fantastic resource, a great introduction to what you're talking about, the
yeah,
science of the neuroplastic or mind-body approach,
yeah.
and also a very practical book. We'll put some notes in the video about that so that people can find that resource. So you observed, first of all, a reduction in your anxiety when you read the book, the
Yeah.
anxiety about the pain and what it meant for
Yeah.
you. And then you were driven to actually do the training. So you weren't focused so much on pain reduction, but more on educating yourself. It's an interesting way to proceed.
And I think that's really important. I'm glad you said this because I think it's really important to understand. Um, However, knowledge and experience are not the same. And it's really kind of like quite often I say to people, because this is always a question I get, right? How long will it take for me to get out of
Yes,
pain? Of course, we
sure. We
want to
want to
know.
know that. Yeah.
But the way I think about it, it's kind of like riding a bike. So I can explain to you like how it works. And it's quite simple, really. Like, you just get on a saddle, you have pedals, you hold the handlebars, and you move forward and then you balance on two wheels, right? So that's knowing about it. Then I'd say to you, Claire, just get on this bike. Just you know it all. So just do it. And it's like that's when it becomes difficult, right? The and I think this is kind of like the concept of, of the mind-body approach are simple concepts, but it's like safety messaging to the
Yes.
nervous system, regulating the nervous system,
Yes.
we can understand those concepts, but it's not enough for us to get better because we need to get on the bike. And then what I find interesting too, is that just like when you ride a bike, you don't get to decide consciously when you're going to start balancing. It's your vestibular system, it's your nervous system that decide. And why today? I don't know. It's like- That's how long it took for your nervous system and your brain to make that decision
Yeah.
and to accept this new neural pathway.
I
So
relate very much to that because I think it was the intellectualizing and reading more and more that kept me out of my body,
yeah.
um, and stopped me from actually experiencing the safety. The riding the bike analogy is so good. It reminds me of the time I had a brief period of time when I trained as a swimming instructor.
Yes.
And people would try shouting at people in the water who were afraid, relax, relax. And that doesn't really,
That doesn't,
instructing someone how to relax doesn't work until they experience the physical safety in their body.
yeah. It's finding like it's really guiding a person to find their own way into safety. And that can look vastly different from one person to another. Um,
Absolutely. Yes.
yeah. And
Yes.
it's just kind of like that's why like my own story will be different from somebody else's story, but
Yes.
they will be common threads in the stories that we can kind of, explore and be curious about and then apply, like experience. So
Yes.
everybody's got to get because everybody's got a different bike, right?
Yes.
And it takes like and for some people they can like learn very quickly and other people it just takes longer, but it's possible for everyone because
For
everybody's got a nervous system and a brain, right?
yes.
It's just that they're different.
Yes.
And the personal history is different. And then some people have trauma, others like don't really, they just have, like difficulties because life, Um,
Absolutely.
so it very much depends.
Yes. We've all had things that we've been through, and uh,
Yeah,
what we might describe as relatively small things can be at the root of what's causing some very severe conditions, in the body. So just
absolutely.
to bring us forward to now, what was the trajectory from doing the training to the point where you started to see a reduction in the symptoms?
Well, so in that moment in the training when I like experienced safety, on that day, because the other thing that I suffered from because after doing the training, I got COVID and I got it badly. I was like really unwell for like 6 weeks. Um, but interestingly, my pain disappeared altogether.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I was like experiencing other really, really terrible, really uncomfortable symptoms. So I hardly noticed and or cared. But and when I started recovering, it slowly came back. And I was just like, that doesn't make sense. This is completely nonsensical. Like, why would it? I mean, if I've got something like truly physical, then it's there, and then and then I've got the other symptoms on top of it, right? This
Yes.
is kind of like, but it disappeared like really altogether, and then came back slowly, gradually as I got better with the other symptoms. But then I kind of like some of the symptoms of COVID like lingered, like fatigue and brain fog. Um, and and then I just thought, wait, why don't I apply like things that I've learned to those symptoms? And then and so interestingly, I wasn't concentrating on the pain, but kind of got curious about like the other symptoms that I felt less were like less threatening to me and started seeing like results. And that really got me very excited. And then with the help of a therapist, I just, use like, hypnotherapy, but also IFS style, so internal family systems,
Internal
like so
family
it's
system.
parts work, having
Yeah.
like, communicating to our different parts. And I think that that was really, really helpful because this is something that exists in the world of hypnotherapy. Part work is it's not a new idea, like in in the psychotherapeutic circles, but I do really love the framework of IFS though. I think it's highly I find it highly effective. And it really kind of somehow spoke to me and allowed me to connect to my emotions in a different parts and my inner child or my inner children. And that was really, really powerful in helping like resolving symptoms. So the principle is still the same. I was feeling safe, like quite safe connecting to really kind of heavy emotional stuff that I found quite overwhelming, but it allowed me to access it in a way that didn't feel so overwhelming. So it was really kind of the start of me getting like really better. And then it kind of like it's one of those things where you have, it's like the bike analogy is just kind of like, and one day I was like balancing, meaning I had no pain, but and I kind of like at the end of the day I was just like, did I have pain or did I not notice it? And I was confused for a moment. And then came the obstacle of, well, I used to worry because I had pain and now I'm worrying because I have no pain because I'm worrying it might come back, right?
Yes, of
So
course.
so I had to do like to deal with that journey and the journey of like flare-ups, I think, also, which makes you, and this is what I find so interesting about flare-ups is like flare-ups are like no different to the pain you've been experiencing. It's just the same technique. It's all about safety, right? It's just that you have more or less access to certain things, but it's creating so much doubt and confusion. And you think that nothing's working anymore. So I had to kind of like deal with like flare-ups because I think it's its own thing. And dealing with the fear of like, but what if it's not permanent, right? What if it's
Yes.
just kind of luck or just like when I had COVID, it just went away and then, it will come back. And yeah, so I just continued, with patience and trust. I just continued and really allowed sensations and I think this is kind of like, something that's central to getting better is just really like learning to allow anything, to allow your like thoughts, emotions, sensations, circumstances, anything, like learning to do that so that you're not blocking, you're not resisting, or you're not fueling, danger. So that your nervous system knows that you're okay, even if it's not a great time. And I think that there's like so because I'm French, I have French references quite often. So Albert Camus, who was a French writer, And he said something along the lines of, in the midst of winter, I realized that within me there was an invincible summer.
Oh,
And
wow.
I think that's something that spoke to me so much when I read it, and realizing that within us, there's always a place that we can get to that allows us to weather the storm because it will pass, because it always does. And that's something like that kind of like carried me through the ups and downs of the recovery journey. Um, yeah. And then now, like I really very much like day to day, like I have no pain. Um, but there was like I think it was however this year I had like a sort of like call it an episode of pain, and it surprised me because I was like, I haven't had pain like for years. What's this? And I was very busy with my work, supporting people. And really, it's very easy to forget about yourself when you're helping people and forget about taking time off. But I'd identified that and I was like, okay, so I'm going to book because I mean, I'm my own boss, so I can book myself a holiday. So I decided I'll take a week, like in a couple of weeks' time, I'll take a week off. And the moment I do this, I get a message from my mother who lives in France and I'd moved to a new place, to a new house, and she hadn't seen it. And then she said, "Oh, I saw that there's like a cheap flight to come and see you." And the week that she was wanting to come was the week after the week I'd booked for myself, right?
Yes.
And I was just like, "Oh, it doesn't matter. I love my mother, and it would be so nice to spend time with her and do this." So she came over, and the moment she arrived, I started to have back pain. And it got worse during the week. Right? And we did all these activities that I enjoy, like, going and visiting, like, places and going to museums and restaurants and, good time. And I was on holiday, so supposedly relaxed. And then I realized that what I had done is this people-pleasing thing where because all I wanted to do is really, honestly, nothing. I just wanted to sit on my sofa, read books, watch TV. And the moment I understood it, the pain went. And then I gave myself that day of nothingness, and I just instantly felt better, and I haven't had pain since. Isn't that
Wow.
interesting to kind of see that? And I think that that's the gift of this work is kind of like when something goes wrong or we're experiencing like discomfort, whether emotional or like, just like physical, like pain, um, then we start like, instead of like instantly reacting on autopilot, like, and panicking and going into some sort of anxious kind of cycle, become curious. And then when you become curious, like the relationship changes. And that means that you're allowing that thing to be there because you want to understand it and you want to connect to it and you want to feel. And then when you do that, then, sometimes it does feel like truly magical that it just kind of goes because you put your finger on the thing that's really important, which is to not fall back into old patterns like the people pleasing and being able to say no even if when it's close family and even when you love them and even when you want them to come,
Yes.
it's
Even when
like
it's something you want to do. Yeah.
it's your own needs and it's to do with, boundaries and being able to express that in a way that feels respectful to yourself and the other people. Yeah, so but apart from this episode, like I'm back at capoeira. I just move. I feel like my body is a lot feels more resilient because now when I move and I do activities, and I feel like muscle soreness from like, working out and things like this. I'm like, this is good, right? And I relate to my sensation in a completely different way. And when I
Different.
feel like it's not feeling good, and I'm just like, oh, it's a little bit tired. I'm just gonna, care for my body. I'm going to look after it. I'm going to give it some rest, and that's very, very different to the way I was doing things, because I think I had an approach of like, you know, you're listening to your body, but like your agenda is really to bend it to your will, you know, and be a bit more flexible, a little bit stronger, and this and that, because my the mind becomes the dictator of the body, and that's when things become problematic, because then they're not separate, they work hand in hand.
Absolutely.
um yeah.
I love that story about your mum that so perfectly illustrates that. I love your quote from Albert Camus and how we're not a problem to be fixed, that we're uncovering our own inner strength and understanding ourselves more. I feel like we could talk for a long time. Perhaps we'll
Yes.
need to make this episode one, but we should draw to a close at this point. And thank you so much for sharing your story, Jean. I think you'll have helped a lot of people. So many great insights. Would you like to tell people where they can find you if they're interested in hearing more about your work?
Yes, of course. I'm on Substack, and I have a blog called Mind Body Wisdom. On Instagram, I am called Chronic Pain Therapist, and I have a website called paintherapycoaching.co.uk.
Well, I'd encourage people to go and have a look at those resources. There definitely is a lot of wisdom in your blog. So thanks again for sharing with us,
Thank you
Jean.
very much for having me.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.